Right, I'm just going live and we'll give it 10 seconds and I'll kick off, right, Andy? YouTube that. There you go. Right, hello to all who are watching and welcome to Cedarwood Faces. This is episode 4 of the series, and today we're speaking with Andy Bannister, a good friend of mine, author, speaker, and director of Solas. So the aim of the conversations, as you all know by now, is to get to know some of the people behind Cedarwood Festival who are going to be involved both, or who have been involved in the past and will be involved moving forward. If you do have any questions, then do feel free to ping them in the chat, live chat on YouTube, but alternatively, ping them through to email as well, and we'll pick them up there. If you do want to follow and keep in touch with everything that is going down with Cedarwood or anything about the festival, then the channels are the same as usual at Cedarwood Festival. So, Andy, it's great to have you on. Welcome to the show today.
It's really great to be with you this evening, David. How are you doing? You're in your part of the country.
Doing very well. I'm currently calling in from the Shire of York, and very lovely day here it's been. But what about you? Where are you in the world?
Well, actually, it's good you're coming from Yorkshire, because I know Yorkshire well. My grandfather was Yorkshire. As was famously said, you should never, of course, ask a man if he's from Yorkshire, because if he isn't, you'll offend him. He'll be horribly embarrassed, and if he is, well, they'll tell you within 10 seconds anyway. And in my case, my grandfather's from Yorkshire, but I'm not in Yorkshire. I'm in Dundee, in Scotland. So I'm north of you. So it's funny, right? When I was in London, you'd have been north of me, where I grew up, but now I'm in Scotland. You are a southerner, mate. So
exactly.
I'm in Dundee, hour north of Edinburgh.
Essentially a southerner, yeah, at the moment. To the Londoners, very, very northern, but possibly a different country. but Andy, in terms of Dundee, we're going to hear a bit more about why you're based in Dundee in a bit. But before then, for those that don't know Andy, I just wanted to kick off with giving him a chance to just give a bit of an overview of kind of his kind of story up to now, where he's lived, and just a bit of background so people can get to know him as well, just a bit. So give us a bit of an overview, Andy, of kind of your work life and hobbies as well, and then we'll kick off
all that kind of stuff.
Conversation.
Brilliant. Well, I'll do the kind of view from 30,000 feet, and anything you think viewers might want to know more, you can just drill deeper. So I was born and raised in London. I've lost a bit of the London accent, but it comes out occasionally. I come from South London, as we describe it there. I grew up in London for most of my life, and worked first in kind of medical education, then actually got involved in Christian ministry through doing youth and schools work. So my job in my mid-20s was to go into all the local secondary schools and try and build bridges between those schools and the churches. And then I got involved in going up to a place in London called Speaker's Corner, kind of world centre of free speech at Hyde Park in London, where you can debate or dialogue about anything. Crowds come to listen to the speakers. And I got involved in debating with Muslims there, David, on the streets of London. And that got me interested in apologetics, the kind of art and science of giving a reason why the Christian hope is true. And that just fascinated me so much that opened up the door into further study. So I did theological study, went and studied theology and philosophy at London School of Theology in North London. And actually that then became a PhD. I stayed on and did a PhD in Quranic studies, not biblical studies. I'm an unusual kind of Christian. And then towards the end of that time, I got hooked up, connected up with a ministry called RZIM. There's been a bit of controversy around that ministry recently. Back then, it was a great organization to work for. And they were looking for someone to run their Canadian office. So we moved from London, my wife and I, over to Canada, to Toronto. Had 6 great years based in Toronto. Loved Canada and Canadian culture and all parts of that, and especially donuts. And had a lot of fun in North America. But we had 2 small children while we were out there, and decided it would be good to come back and be nearer to grandparents. So we moved back to the UK in 2016, and an opportunity to head up Solas, and we may talk more about that, the organisation in due course, but the organisation I run now up in Scotland came up, and it was sort of, there was almost no money, and it was very pioneering and sort of quite a daring venture at the time. And we like stuff that's a little bit edgy. So we thought, heck, let's go for it. Let's go and try something entrepreneurial and exciting. So we moved to Dundee. And from where I now crisscross the country, either talking to skeptical audiences about the Christian faith or helping equip Christians to talk to their skeptical friends. So that's a rough 30,000 foot view.
Wow.
And sort of outside of that, I'm married. I've been married to my wife, Astrid, for, where are we, 23 years. It'll be this year. Gosh, that's kind of fast. Got 2 children, Katrina, who's 8, and my son, Christopher, who's 5, almost 6. And any spare time I get in between teaching and writing and traveling, David, I mean, you and I share this kind of love. I love the mountains. One of the things that did bring me to Scotland. So I'm working my way through my Munros and climbing mountains in every spare moment. I'm wearing Patagonia gear in most videos that I do, in the vain hope that one day they'll decide not just to sponsor rock climbers, but to sponsor philosophers.
Well, I think that's great, Andy, and thanks for kind of lovely bookend there with your hobbies. And yeah, in terms of that, it's amazing. You've gone from London to Canada, the UK, obviously, to then Dundee. Many people would ask, kind of, Dundee, what kind of, obviously that's where the ministry is, but was there any other reason for Dundee? Why was the ministry based there? I mean, it doesn't seem like, to the naked eye, a very strategic place to be, but maybe enlighten us.
I can see the comments thread, David, lighting up with angry Dundonians saying, how can you possibly suggest? I mean, it's interesting, actually, historically, Dundee was quite an important city. I mean, today it's about Scotland's 5th largest city, I think, but historically, massive centre of ship building there in terms of Christian stuff. Very famous Scottish Christian called Robert Murray McCheyne was based here at St. Peter's Church, hugely influential in the history of Scottish and British Christianity. But then Dundee sort of fell on its sort of bad times a bit and has sort of sunk a bit in recent years. But the reason I'm here is because Solas was here, and Solas is here because the chap who founded it was a pastor called David Robertson, who was actually at Robert Murray McCheyne's church, St. Peter's Church, and David was pastor there. But David has all kinds of interests, not just a pastor. He's also interested in politics and theology and philosophy and talking about the Christian faith in the public square. So he founded Solas about 11 or 12 years ago now, but was struggling to juggle that with everything else that he was doing. And David and I knew each other. So David reached out to me in 2015. He got word that we were thinking of coming back from Canada. And he said, hey, why don't you come to Scotland, come to Dundee and take over Solas? And we thought, yeah, that sounds like an exciting idea. So he very graciously handed it over. And it's very hard to hand over organizations that you start, but David did hand it over, took his hands off and let us kind of get on with it. And so that's why we're here in Dundee. But it's a great place actually to be, because most of the major population centres of Scotland are within about a 90-minute drive of here. You've got Aberdeen, Glasgow, Edinburgh. We've got beautiful scenery. We've got hills, mountains, coastline, woods, forests, big university town here, big medical school here in Dundee. So quite a very multicultural town. Lots of people from around the world and around the United Kingdom. So we like being here. And the other thing as well people may want to know is that Dundee is world famous because we made a famous contribution, David, to world cuisine, in that it was here, allegedly in Dundee.
This is something I'm looking forward to hearing.
The deep fried mince pie was invented. Scotland contributed to the deep fried Mars bar, and there are debates around who came up with that, but we invented the deep fried mince pie about 3 or 4 years ago. And if you've never tried one, I don't blame you.
I was going to say, for those people who are joining us in the flesh at Cedarwood Festival, maybe Andy can bring some of that cuisine down. But from what I've just heard, you're maybe not going to be bringing a whole wagon load of that down.
As Mike Myers, the Canadian comedian, once famously said, all Scottish food is based on a dare.
No, that fits well. I can relate to that. So, Andy, just honing back in a bit. Yeah. Obviously, we had a 30,000 view look. I just wanted the viewers just to hear about how you came to Christ and how you kind of made that decision for yourself. Many people have a kind of journey story. Some people have an instant moment. Just tell the viewers, what was the moment or time thing for you?
Good. So I came to Christ relatively young, in my teens. So I was raised in a good Christian home. I was raised in a Baptist home. And just to reassure you, you don't need to be a Baptist to go to heaven. But why take chances? That's my advice to you this evening. Why risk it? And certainly until I was about 11, 12, maybe 13, I went to church, loved it. And there was never a time when I sort of turned my back on it. But it was very much so, I think, probably my parents' faith, David. I was going because they went. I was hanging on the coattails of what they believed. And then I got connected with an amazing youth organization when I was about 12 or 13 with the most horrendous name now. It was called Crusaders. and they're now called Urban Saints. So I can't think who first thought that naming a Christian organization after medieval fighting knights was a good idea. But it was a wonderful youth organization, and really, founded on a love of Jesus, love of the Bible. And they ran amazing youth camps. And so I think I was either about sort of 13, almost 14, when one weekend, it was a sort of April, May weekend, and there was a youth camp down on a place called Fairlight, which is on the cliffs near Hastings. And it literally was a dark and stormy night. All the best stories go that way, but it was a dark and stormy night. The tents were flapping and the howling gale outside. But it was a great service. And the preacher, who I forget who it was, I don't remember anything about what he preached, other than that was the night when I kind of really felt the Lord sort of putting his finger on my life and going, "Oi, Bannister, you need to respond to this. You need to actually get up and go forward and say yes yourself." And that was the moment I first, I think, remember saying sort of a public yes to Jesus in my own regard, not just because mum and dad thought it was a good thing. And then, sort of my faith developed through my kind of teens. And then another thing really that was very, very instrumental. And I think, and often when we talk about how we came to faith, we talk about the testimony of how we became, and then we stop. But I think the journey that carries on in discipleship is crucial. And a crucial thing for me was when I was 18, I did a gap year and joined a kind of Christian youth project for a year that put young people into teams of 4 and sent them to the other end of the country. And I ended up going to Sunderland up there in the northeast of England, and with 3 other people I'd never met in my life, and just getting flung into youth ministry and church ministry and stuff. And it was amazing, actually, because I discovered very quickly I had to learn to pray, because the things I was being asked to do, I had no experience, and it was very quickly sink or swim. And the only way to swim rather than sink was to pray. And of course, there's a connection to what you're doing, because that's when I really discovered myself in the Northeast. And Durham, right? Of course, which is Cedarwood's going to be Durham, right? That was where I used to go on the weekends. So Sunderland was like my working week. When I had a free Saturday, I would get on the bike and I would pedal over to Durham. Just fell in love with the city of Durham, especially the cathedral. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous setting, and the coast up and down there. So, like, Northumbrian coast is one of my favourite places. Lindisfarne and the beaches there. So
there's so much history in terms of Christian history, but also secular history that has gone on in the northeast of England, and obviously obviously Sunderland and Durham well. So it's going to be great to have you back, Andy, and no doubt you'll share some of those experiences when you share at the festival. We'll hear more about what you're going to be involved in at the festival in a bit. But I think just one thing to note there is just again and again we're hearing a lot of speakers and a lot of people that are going to be contributing to Cedarwood. A lot of the experiences, these times when they make those decisions and have those encounters, have been at Christian camps, have been at these times that are formative for them. And I think it's in light of that we think it's just so important that we invest in all ages, in the children, in the youth, and also in adults to ask these big questions and to come together in this way. So it's important.
I'm going to be cheeky, David. I'm an opportunity for you to plug Cedarwood here. I'm going to turn that question around on you. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that things like camps and festivals and those things are often places of spiritual significance for people? Any ideas?
I think they're very significant for the main reason that we're not undermining the kind of the day-to-day discipleship that people get in their local church, but it's a time when you come and you kind of see maybe the bigger picture, the capital church, the capital C come together, and you can experience God in a different way. You see expressions from maybe other people's walks and other denominations, and I think that's when we're going to talk a bit about Islam and Christianity, and how maybe looking at other walks brings you closer to your own faith. I think it's that. I think it's sharing that experience with other people, and and just having that corporate environment. And I think also it's digging into some of these questions, Andy, that maybe we've got some questions we're gonna look at tonight, but it's digging in some of these questions that and being challenged in certain areas that you maybe wouldn't on a day-to-day basis in your local church, which is not right or wrong, but it's just there's maybe more capacity at a larger event to do that. So I think that's some of the reason. It's the Holy Spirit works all over the place with any number, as we know, but I think that those are some of the reasons for that. But yeah, jumping on to the kind of the key area that you're focusing on in a lot of your ministry, Andy. Obviously, you're an apologist, you're an author. We're going to come to talk a bit about the books, and we'll give an opportunity to have a little drop onto the latest edition of that. But in terms of Islam, obviously you experienced that at Speaker's Corner. You experienced that. Why specifically was it Islam that kind of really caught your eye rather than say Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever? What was it in that area?
Well, the sort of cheeky and simplistic answer, but I will unpack it and give you the longer one, is that I think, it was totally of the Lord. It was never something I planned, never something I intended, but God very, very much made clear. And the way that God tends to guide me, some people sort of, hear from the Lord 3 times before breakfast, while they're brushing their teeth and stuff. Doesn't happen to me. For me, the Lord has to drop like concrete, like sleepers across the path that I'm going to get me to go somewhere new, because I'm not very subtle. And so in my case, it was, I was during the time when I was doing the schools ministry that I described kind of earlier, the church that I was attending had a kind of training weekend for a summer mission that I was involved in leading with some others. There were teams going across Europe. I was taking a team with others to Spain, but there was a team going to Morocco, I think, from memory. And so as part of the training 3 days, they had someone come and teach on Islam. And the person that came and taught on Islam was a gentleman called Jay Smith, who's now a good friend of mine and quite well known as someone who engages a lot with Muslims. And Jay, as part of his training, described how every weekend he was up there at Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, on a ladder, debating with Muslims. And it just sounded amazing. I'd never heard of anything even wildly like this. And I got talking to him over the lunch break, and he's very charismatic and very engaging. And I found him fascinating to talk to. And he said to me, well, Andy, why don't you come to Speaker's Corner? When you get back from the mission in Spain, come to Speaker's Corner, see what we do. So lo and behold, about a month later, I schlepped up at Speaker's Corner. And met Jay at Marble Arch Station, Underground Station, and lo and behold, he had 2 ladders, one on either shoulder. And I said, Jay, why have you got 2 ladders? He went, one is for me and one's for you. I said, dude, you said come and see what we do. He went, the best for you, mate, on a ladder. I said, but Jay, I've never preached on the street before. He went, it's so easy, a fool could do it. I said, well, okay, I've never talked to a Muslim before. They're easy, so easy. They're just the easiest people to talk to. Well, both those things were wrong by an incredible factor of wrongness. And in fact, I got on a ladder, and the Muslims at Speaker's Corner were well practiced, David, in heckling Christians. And they tore me to pieces. And I remember getting down from the ladder thinking, well, I guess I need to become a Muslim because they have everything. I got nothing. I remember going home on the train worrying about this, and I laid awake that night worrying about that. But the following morning, my wife sort of went, stop moaning. Go to the Christian bookstore or something. There's bound to be a book that will help you. So I went to the local Christian bookstore, told them my story, and they said, Andy, you need apologetics. And I said, what's that? I thought it sounded like a breakfast cereal, actually. But no, of course, it's the art and science of defending your faith. And they sold me some books, and I read for the next 2 weeks, got answers to every question, went back to Speaker's Corner 2 weeks later, and had answers, and they had new questions. And I looked stupid all over again. But I'm quite a determined chap, David. So for the next 3 months, I would go to Speaker's Corner on the weekend, and I'd go home and I'd read to get the answers. I'd go back the following week, and we'd repeat this. And slowly, I kind of got a foot in there and began to understand my own faith better and engage with Muslims. And during that time, almost without me noticing, God did a couple of things. He gave me a love of publicly talking about and defending the Christian faith. And he gave me a love of engaging with Muslims. And those 2 things grew together. And that's when I then decided to go to theological college. It was pretty darn obvious I would pick somewhere that could do some Islamics. When I came to do a PhD, it was pretty obvious. Well, why would I sort of study, John the Apostle's use of the semicolon in the first chapter of the Greek of John's Gospel, which is a bit boring because actually there is no punctuation in Greek. But one thing led to another. So it was really God. It was that quote unquote accidental meeting with Jay Smith. It was Jay, for some, and actually to this day, he said, I don't know why I did that. You're the only person I've ever done that with. I've never, seriously said, I've never with anybody else done that. Just with you, it sort of felt the right thing to do. And
You'll
so I just think,
next time we'll get 3 ladders, one for you, one for him, and one for someone else. So I can.
Well, come, David. We'll take you to Speaker's Corner sometime.
Well, I've been there. I've been there a number of times, but I've never stood up and chatted. It's more been observation, as you said the first time. This is what you were expecting, but I'd be happy to be. I'd welcome that. Andy, that's great, and it is fascinating hearing how people kind of get into their ministries and move on that. So while we're on that, I just wanted to for some of our viewers who maybe aren't au fait, you've mentioned the word apologetics a few times, Andy, but we're obviously very familiar with that. For the people who aren't maybe watching now or moving forward, stumbling across this, what just in a very basic words, what is apologetics? Is it just for Christianity and Christians, or is it all over? And where's it come from? Just in very layman's terms.
Thanks for asking. And I actually feel really guilty, actually, because normally I often avoid the word, and so I stumbled into it tonight because I'm a bit tired. And
it's all right.
That's
what I'm here for.
Try and unpack is good stuff. So there we are. So the word apologetics, let's start with what it means. It really means the kind of art and science of persuasion. And it's usually used in context of the Christian faith. So it comes out of in the Bible, in the New Testament, take a verse like 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, which is one of the letters of Jesus' close disciple Peter in the New Testament. Peter, writing to Christians being persecuted by the Romans around the world, around the Christian world, around the ancient world, says, in your heart, set apart Christ as Lord, but always be willing to give a reason, to give an answer for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect, and so on and so forth. And that little phrase that's translated into English, give an answer, give a reason, is the Greek word, because the New Testament was written in Greek, apologia, from which we get apologetics, which is basically giving a reason or a persuasive reason that the Christian faith is true. Now, the reason I just say I need to apologize, we usually at Solas avoid the word for the very simple reason that, exactly as you say, most people have never heard of it. So I think you bounced me into it tonight. I'll blame you. And the phrase I prefer, and the phrase we normally use at Solas, is persuasive evangelism. If I'm engaging someone who's a skeptic, who doesn't believe in the Christian faith, I want to give them good reasons why Christianity is true. I believe there are excellent reasons to take Christianity seriously. I think it's important that we share those with people. We can do it persuasively. Now, sometimes there'll be intellectual reasons. For others, they might be more aesthetic reasons or emotional reasons or other reasons, or wired differently. Appealing to the imagination is something that's actually, been done historically by Christian communicators through the ages. And then for Christians, again, I often say to people, look, the word apologetics sounds quite complicated, but just think of it in terms of persuasive evangelism. When you share your faith with your friends, neighbors, and colleagues, would you prefer you to be persuasive or unpersuasive? And most of us would prefer to be persuasive. So that's what apologetics really is. It's engaging in a persuasive way.
Great. Thanks for that clarification, just for our viewers who may be unclear. Thanks for that, Andy. And so you beautifully moving on there, you mentioned Solas. Obviously, this is who you're working with and directing this organization at the moment. Solas, so tell us a bit about what that ministry does. Obviously, you've mentioned it, apologetics and persuasively talking, what the ministry does and what some of the opportunities are for, how, what's been going on during COVID for Solas and what have been the opportunities?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, David, to Solas, the organization I lead, Solas or Solas or however I pronounce it in Scotland, somebody will tell me I'm pronouncing it wrong because, that's fair enough. I'm an English speaker and I mangle the Gaelic. But the Gaelic, or the Gaelic, depending on your preference, really means kind of light, particularly sunlight. And so the image that David Robertson and others who founded Solas was the kind of light of the gospel kind of spreading across the country. And we do really two things, David, at Solas. Firstly is we take the gospel, we take the message of Jesus out of the four walls of the churches and we go into the public square where people are: universities, schools, workplaces, cafes, pubs, curry houses. Curry events is something we do a lot of in Scotland. Before COVID, church would book a local curry house, people invite their friends. I, one of the team would come and do a talk on something Q&A afterwards. And then, of course, after a curry event, you can invite people to Korma to Jesus. Right? See, Korma to never do that joke ever again.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we do, moving rapidly on from terrible puns, is we teach and we train, we equip Christian men and women just how to, again, share their faith in Jesus in a natural, persuasive, kind of engaging way. Because I think actually lots of people are interested in questions of spirituality, and we just need to learn how to engage people winsomely. And there's often incredible opportunities under our noses. And we, since COVID kind of kicked off, obviously we did most of our stuff in person, and of course that became impossible for the last year. In fact, I can vividly remember coming back from a big speaking event in Glasgow, and it was the night that Boris Johnson announced the country was going to lockdown. I remember getting home saying to my wife, I suppose the next 3 weeks will be a bit quiet then. Little did I know that three weeks would turn into whatever. But what we did, like a lot of organizations, is we pivoted our work online. And actually, on the one hand, I found that quite frustrating because I'm off the scale extrovert. I love engaging with people. It's where I come alive. But also, I discovered you can reach people through a screen, David, that might not come to an event. Some people, lots of people find church is a scary place to come. Some people even find coming to a coffee shop or a pub because it's a church event kind of scary. So, but we found people coming and lurking in events online because they can just lurk anonymously. And so we've had lots of opportunities during lockdown. So we've got lots of content online. And then actually, if people check out the Solas website, just put Solas and my name into Google or Facebook, you'll find us. We've already had lots of digital content already, so we just kind of maximize that. And the simple answer, the opportunities are incredible. Just two very recent stories. About a month ago, I had the privilege of speaking at a university mission. That's when the students on the campus ran a series of events across the week down in the Midlands. And it was great because even though I was in Dundee, I didn't have to travel, could do all the events online for them. and we had loads of people who hadn't got any Christian faith coming to events. And then we started the follow-up stuff last week, and I don't always get to do follow-up, but again, because it's just Zoom and I can just jump on, I piled into the follow-up group, and it was fantastic. And among the students in the follow-up group, it was just hilarious. We had an atheist who is really actually, I think, quite close to Christian faith, but the stumbling block was miracles, and for her, the resurrection. And then we had a Muslim, who again is quite close in some ways, but his stumbling block was the crucifixion, because the Quran denies that Jesus was crucified. So it was hilarious. I would answer her on the resurrection, and then over here they'd be, but how could Jesus, who's the Messiah, be crucified? It's like, oh my good grief, it's just hilarious. Crucifixion, resurrection. And we had a great time. And that was really exciting. And then workplace events. We've done some amazing places in the last few months. I've had the privilege of speaking at London Stock Exchange. I did an event for the Ministry of Defence a few months ago. And that was exciting, because I was going to go in person and speak on just one MOD site to an event that the Christians there had organised. And that might have got 50 or 60 people. But because of COVID, they did it online, which meant anyone working for the MOD anywhere in the country. And we had hundreds. And they've asked me to come back. So in about 2 weeks' time, then I spoke on God and science. In 2 weeks' time, I think I'm speaking on the pursuit of happiness, why we look for the meaning of life in all the wrong places. Wow. And again, just really excited for that opportunity. Wow. So yeah, it's incredible opportunities, David, and all of that. And all of that we do it with local church groups and partnering with local church groups. We're not a kind of ministry that likes to come in and say, "Hey, we're big and famous. Look at our names in lights. Come to us." The model that Solas has always used is, we're here as a resource, and if you're a Christian group at work or a church that needs help with something, we'd love to come alongside and serve and resource, and then step back and let the local Christians just run with it, because we think the local church is brilliant. God invented it, and anything we can do to help, the better.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Andy, there, because I know a lot of churches are worried that organizations can come in and maybe feel like, oh, they're taking over my congregation. They're going to be taking, members, when it's such a precious thing to look after a group of people in the church. And so I think that's a really important point for churches out there. Solas and these other organizations are really there to support the body of Christ and to equip you as a leader, rather than to kind of poach, which some people may be worried about. And I think that's Andy will be talking more about that at Cedarwood. We'll hear more about that at the event and before the end of this as well. But Andy, you mentioned, obviously we've talked a lot about Islam. For those who are Christians, obviously listening to this, the joy of online is you never know who's going to be listening. But for those who are just kind of thinking, wow, Islam, I've maybe got, I know about Islam, I've heard some, I haven't really got any Muslim friends, but give people maybe just the you've written a book, we're going to talk about that in a second, but in terms of Islam and Christianity, can you give people just like maybe a quick few pointers as to some of the key big differences between I know we could talk about this for months.
Oh, but, yeah, we could do hours on this, couldn't we, David?
In a nutshell, just kind of give us a bit of a difference there of what the two are like.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, and we're going to obviously talk about the book a bit later, but in the second chapter of the book, I set out a framework that you can use when people of any two faiths or no faiths dialogue, and 4 questions that you can explore. Is there a God? Do you believe there's a God, and what's God like? Who or what are human beings? What's gone wrong with the world, and what's the solution? And interesting, I mean, you can, as a Christian, ask that question of an atheist. If you're a Hindu, you can ask that question of a Buddhist. It's a great set of 4 questions. And they're a great set of questions, David, on which to peg my answer to what you've said there, because on those 4 key questions, Muslims and Christians differ profoundly. If you start with the question of God, yeah, absolutely. Both Muslims and Christians believe there is a God, but we disagree profoundly about the nature of that God, so much so that I think it's questionable whether we really believe in the same God. In particular, Christians and Jews as well, actually, because I talk a lot about both the Old and New Testament in the book. So Christians and Jews would believe from the Bible in a God who is personal, God who's relational. Yes, he's a God who's high and lofty and lifted up. He's God, but he's also a God who steps into space and time and history, walked and talked with Adam and Eve, appeared at the burning bush to Moses, interacts with his people in history time after time after time. He's a God who's relational. He's a God who can be known. In fact, the whole invitation of the Bible is not just to know about God, but to know him. He's a God who is love. And he's a God who's demonstrated that love through suffering, through actually demonstrating the highest form of love, self-sacrificial love in the person of Jesus. And we have more time, we can unpack all of that. Quran comes along, the scripture of Islam, and it denies all of those characteristics. He's the God of the Quran is not a relational God. That's simply not his nature. He's high and lofty and lifted up, but he can't be known or related to personally. He's not a God who can be known. As a Muslim, you can know about him, but you can't know him. The Quran's very clear on that. He's not a God who is love. The Quran does use the word love a few times, although many Arabists think the best way to translate that word in the Quran is more of like or approve rather than love. But it's a very weird kind of love in the Quran. Of the sort of 42 times that the word love appears in the Quran related to God, the majority of those are negative. The Quran tells you the kind of people God doesn't like or approve of, and the other ones are conditional. There's no unconditional love in the Quran to be found. And the God of the Quran hasn't suffered. He hasn't paid personally. He hasn't self-sacrificed. He hasn't given of himself. He's kind of sat up in heaven. So that's God. And then very rapidly, the other three, human beings in the Bible, human beings bear the image of God. Yes, we're made from the dust of the earth, but God has breathed into us, and we are more than just the stuff of which we are made. Quran rejects that idea. Human beings are not image bearers. They're just slaves, just servants. Yeah, maybe the pinnacle of creation, but not more than that. And then coming to the problem, what's gone wrong with the world, Islam says the problem with the world is we're basically forgetful. God wants us to behave a certain way. We forget how to do it. So God just dishes out some more commands. Christianity says, no, our actual very natures are corrupted. The problem for humanity is not that we don't know what to do. Most of us actually do know what to do. We just don't have the power to do it. And that's our lived everyday experience, actually. And then lastly, the solution. Islam says the solution is good advice. You just need some more moral advice, David. Here are some commands. Just keep those and you'll be okay. There is some really nice bit of advice there. And whereas the Bible says, no, we actually need rescue. We actually need more than rescue, more than just advice. We need rescue. In fact, the chapter in the book I've written on that, I describe as, I call self-help or salvation. The Quran offers a moral self-help program. The Bible actually offers salvation and a savior. So that's basically that's a lightning whistle-stop tour through what takes 4 chapters in the book to go into, but there are some
absolutely great, Andy, and we're going to jump onto the book now. Andy, you've obviously written a number of books. I think one of them is on atheism, and obviously this one is you've got this one beautifully timed.
I was going to pull the atheist one off my shelf, but the only version I could find was the Norwegian edition that's just come out. So it is available in English. The Atheist Who Didn't Exist is the English title, not I can't even pronounce Norwegian, so I won't try.
Yeah, I won't ask you to do that now for our Norwegian guests or listeners.
And this one,
but Andy's most recent book is this book here. Do Muslims and Christians worship the same God? And Andy and I have obviously chatted at length about this topic, and it's a big question. It's a big as we've gone through it rapidly just now. It can be expanded on for hours and weeks indeed. But I'd highly recommend getting a copy of that. And obviously there's many books that look at different angles, but I think this is just a real stark comparison and very powerful for these questions that are being asked in this day and age. So, Andy, obviously you've talked a bit about the comparison of Christianity and obviously Islam. Is this book for beginners? Is this book for an advanced reader? Because obviously it's just important to share that. And give us a bit of an overview of the book in general. You've talked about that a minute ago, but just a book in general, and then who's it for?
Oh my word. So an overview of the book in general. The 60-second overview, David, would be, I start actually with personal story. I talk about growing up in London, very multicultural sort of background that I grew up in, all faiths and none, how I went to a school that was very multicultural. My best friend at school was Muslim. And how I really, as a teenager, even after I become, a committed Christian, I really assumed that Islam was basically pretty much like Christianity. And my Muslim friends and I, we never really talked about faith. We just sort of knew each other were religious. Then through Speaker's Corner, and we've talked about that today, I suddenly discovered, oh my gosh, actually, Muslims and Christians believe wildly different things. And my Muslim friends are not in Speaker's Corner, are not afraid to tell me. And so that really led me into this journey to dive deep into Islam. And through that, discovered that actually they are not just wildly different, but actually I think the evidence that Christianity is true and Islam is not is overwhelming. From there, we move on into the book into exploring, well, is it okay to say that? We live in a culture where the idea that you might say my religion is true and his religion is false, people go, oh, really? Can you say that? And so I help people go, yes, you can say that. It's not offensive. It's not rude. It's not arrogant. There are ways of doing that but there are ways of doing it that are friendly and engaging.
There are definitely ways, aren't there? Definitely ways.
Absolutely are. Then we move into that fourfold framework that I talked about to help people understand and talk to different religions. Then we have a chapter looking at God in Islam and Christianity, humanity in Islam and Christianity, what's gone wrong with the world in both, according to both faiths, and what the solution is. And then penultimate chapter, David, I say how all of those attributes of God and everything that God has done in terms of, rescuing the humanity that he holds so dear in Christianity is summed up in the person of Jesus. Because for Christians, of course, we believe if you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. He is by far the greatest example, because he's not just someone who talked about God. He is God himself come in human flesh. In Christianity, it's God himself come to ultimately reveal himself to us. And then the last chapter is really just perhaps an invitation to Muslims to discover this for themselves around, and the last chapter focused particularly around a very famous story that Jesus told in the Bible, sometimes called the story of the prodigal son, but better, more accurately known as the story of the father with two sons. And it's a story Jesus told about a father who had two sons, an elder, kind of quite rebellious son, and an older, legalistic, hyper-religious, uptight son. Both the sons had missed for different reasons the love of their father, and both in some ways represent the ways that I think Muslims sometimes respond to God. And so I use that story to introduce Muslims to Jesus. That's the framework of the book.
Great.
And what I would say, if people want to get a look at it, I'd say it's a popular level book. People go to the Solas website, again, we mentioned it earlier, or solas-cpc.org, or look us up on Facebook. You can actually find on the Solas website, on the front page, there's a page about the book. Click through. You can get the first chapter free. Get the first chapter free either as a PDF or as an audiobook. If you're more of a listener type, you can listen to it.
Right.
And my goal, David, is always write for a popular audience. So it's full of illustrations. It's full also of humor. Anyone who's heard me speak will know that, there's a groan a minute. Well, groan every 5 minutes. Sometimes occasionally I hit the mark. Sometimes I miss the mark entirely and the bullet goes into the next county. But you need to read the footnotes when you read this book. There's lots of humor and comedy and sort of fast moving stuff. And my goal is that, I suppose in terms of reading ability, if you could happily pick up, a broadsheet newspaper or listen to a BBC News report and be fine processing it, which is probably most of us listening to this, you'll be fine with the book. And the other thing, actually, it's the first time I've done this in a book, David, and I've been really encouraged, actually, because I nixed the idea from somebody else and I put it in the last minute. Every chapter in the book ends with like 3 or 4 key takeaways that summarize that
really good
chapter. And I had so many people email and say, "Oh, Andy, man, that was really helpful that you did that." And I'm always the first to go, "It wasn't my idea. I nicked it from a friend of mine who did it in his book." And so again, it means it just helps reinforce the teaching stuff. That once you've read the book, you can then skip through and just look at the bullet points at the end of each chapter, and you'll have a really good, recollection of where you've been.
And I think the other really good thing I think just to mention is that there's a good bit at the back with further reading information and a kind of a bit of a information as to kind of what some of the key words mean, which is really important. And just to note as well, this book's been recommended, I think, by obviously our friend Amy or Ewing and Richard Schumacher, who are people who are very read up in this area as well. And Tom Holland as well, Andy.
I was so pleased with Tom. So for folks who don't know Tom, Tom is I think secular is the sort of the right description. He's only not a Christian. Might be an agnostic. Very, very well regarded historian. Has written many learned books, and bless him. He's written on the subject of Christianity and Islam. And so he was willing to commend the book, because although he's not a Christian, he said, it's to me, it's patently obvious that they're not the same religion. Yeah. And Andy's done a good job. One thing you didn't mention, I thought you'd go for, actually, the further resources at the back. Did you like the chilies? So we just at the back, the further resources at the back of the book, we've categorized them into like easy reads and complicated reads. And I was like, how do we do that in a fun way? And so one of my colleagues at Solas actually came up with the idea of doing a chili rating, like in a Thai restaurant menu. So, if you want a nice light read for a summer's evening, a little glass of wine next to you on the patio, you want a 1 chili read. If you're like, bring it on, man, bring it on. You want a 3 chili. You want a 3 chili read. That's all there for you.
Don't speak with anyone for the next 4 days and get into a nice late
That's place. It. I need a mango lassi to like recover afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, Andy. Well, so how can people get a hold of it? You said obviously the Solas website, but on Amazon, I can imagine IVP.
Yeah, it's exactly wherever books are sold is the simple answer. The one thing to say is the paperback, this puppy, is not yet out in the USA, and I know the interwebs, things are connected. So if you are an American or Canadian, I apologize that it's not quite out yet. It's going to be the beginning of May, but you can get in North America, you can get the ebook, or the audiobook. And the best way to do that is go to the Solas website, click through to the book page, and there are links there to places like Audible, Amazon, other ebook stores. In the UK, you can get the paperback, any publisher. I do encourage you, one thing I would say, actually, very seriously, David, listening to this, try and use somewhere actually other than Amazon. If you're a Christian listening to this, there's lots of great websites. You go to IVP Direct, go to Eden Books and others. If you're not a Christian listening to this, again, try and find a local bookseller or one of the smaller websites, because as we know, our friends at Amazon do tend to hoover up a lot of the book trade, and it'd be great to keep other publishers and distributors in business. So
good stuff.
Try and get it from your local independent bookstore who
Perfect.
need your trade.
Andy, do you just want to kind of hold the book up for one last time, just so people can get a look at that, and then we'll take that from there. That's fantastic. Great. So Andy, we've talked about the book. We've had a few questions come in just this evening, 3 questions actually, and I'll just whistle through them with you now. So you obviously are doing a lot of question and answer sessions, through whether it's at universities or with different organizations at these, on the move and online as well. What would you say the most common question you get asked is? You've obviously been asked a lot of them. What is the most common one, in your opinion, if you had a log?
Oh, brilliant. Yes. Well, assuming the question isn't just about Islam, what we've been talking about, but generally, David, I would say I actually seen a bit of a shift, actually. In recent years, they've gone from perhaps the more sort of traditional questions about Christian faith through to perhaps a lot more existential ones. So it used to be the case that science was a very common question. How do you, can you reconcile science and the Christian faith? Which the answer is yes. There is a longer answer, but the simple answer is yes. And all those kind of things. But in recent years, and COVID has accelerated this, I think we've moved much more now into questions that concern more the emotions and the heart and interior feelings. And I would say, David, the top 2 right now that we're getting a lot are, where is God in a world of pain and suffering? I mean, that's always been there, but COVID, I think, has really brought that question to the fore, because many people have experienced pain and suffering personally for the first time. There was a time where, look, many of us were in good health. We didn't worry about these things, but suddenly, wow, COVID has swept the old certainties away. So that question. And then related to that, actually, loads of people asking questions now about meaning and purpose and hope. I mentioned I'm going to go and speak at the MOD thing, and the topic they wanted was the pursuit of happiness. And the brief was simply, look, everyone seems to be asking about these kind of questions. And it's fascinating. I mean, the Guardian, of all pieces, left-wing, newspaper, secular newspaper, not particularly friendly to religion, I think it was 3-4 days ago, ran a major feature article by one of their staff writers saying, for too long we haven't asked questions about what the purpose of life is, and it's one of the reasons we're all hurting, because COVID has taken many of the certainties away. And I read that and went, my word, you are right. And so I'd say that kind of question. So we do a lot of talks around that.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating, that shift. I can relate to that in some of those, and we've had another question coming in terms of, I guess this is similar to the answer you just gave in terms of the most topical question. I guess that's around the hope and through COVID as well. We've been in this situation a year now, this pandemic. You mentioned about being in a 3-week lockdown, where it's obviously turned out.
We have, exactly. And the other one I'd add to that, David,
topical,
if you wanted, the other topical one, just very briefly, because again, I think whether you're a Christian watching this, you want to be thinking about topical questions to engage where your friends are. And if you're not a Christian watching this, you're obviously interested in sort of spirituality to some degree, or you just like David's hair and you've just logged on for that reason. And again, it's worth thinking about what are the key questions and how do you answer them from your worldview. And I'd say a key question right now, David, is the whole question of race. It's big in our culture, right? The whole Black Lives Matter and everything else that's kicked off, and of going, I think it's fascinating, because I think people are desperately wrestling for questions around, well, how do we bring justice where there's historic injustice? How do we bring people together? Well, there's a lot that's going on in our culture designed to drive people apart. Let's tribalize people. Let's split people on ethnicity or their sexuality or their gender or goodness knows whatever. And I think I meet more and more people. I don't know, man, we need something to bring us together. What's going to unite us? And boy, I think Christians have got something to say into that question.
Very, very, very topical. You hit the nail on the head there, Andy. I think just the last few days since while we're filming this, it's been the report for the UK has come out, hasn't it, on race and from the government, and so it's a fascinating read, I think, and many people are kind of both sides of the conversation there, pulling some big questions out about it, and so very, very relevant indeed. And the final question that's just come in that I think would just be nice to finish with is, obviously, Andy, there's a lot of us who, spend a lot of time, really a luxury, I think, and a privilege to be able to sit and think about these big questions. A lot of
Yeah.
people, and to look at the study and the material that is out there for maybe for some of our viewers. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we're without doubt or without any questions ourselves. For you, what would be the kind of the biggest thing that you that is kind of for against theism, would you say, or that you struggle with, that is kind of in your mind, just to show to people that you are also a human with questions and that you struggle with things as well?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, and I think I would say probably. I mean, the question I think the most about, David, I guess, would be the pain and suffering question. And I frame that within the context of going, I think Christianity offers by far the best answers. And to anyone who's struggling with doubt or skepticism, I always say to people, make sure you compare the alternative. So if you're a Christian, don't just go, oh man, I'm struggling a bit with questions around suffering and man, can I hold on to my faith? But you don't look at the other alternatives, because of course in atheism, for example, there are no answers to suffering. In fact, suffering is just normal. What are you complaining about, dude? That's nature doing its thing. Yep. COVID is great on atheism, arguably, because it's evolution clearing out the herd. We want a strong herd, and it's wiping out the weak and the infirm and whatever. It's natural selection in all its glory. None of my atheist friends have actually led with that. I've seen a couple of brave ones suggest it on social media and get jumped upon. Christianity, I think, has some very compelling answers. It doesn't join all the dots, and it doesn't cross all the T's. And certainly I have questions, particularly around suffering of things like children and so on. And so I suppose that doesn't cause me to doubt, but it does cause me to question. It does cause me grief. And I suppose, to put it this way, there are questions that I look forward to when I see God face to face, as the New Testament promises we will do in the age to come. But I would love to have the opportunity to sit down with Jesus and say, can you help me understand that? And to go, there needs to be humility, because I'm human. I don't see all the variables. But yeah, there's definitely that one. But make sure when you're struggling and wrestling with questions, I say make sure that you talk to people who have thought it through. Yeah. Do and compare. Yeah. Talk to people who are older and wiser, like me at Speaker's Corner. I didn't just sit in a corner and go, I don't know the answers, I'm doomed. Yeah. I went, okay, must be people infinitely brighter than me. That ain't difficult. So go talk to them. And I wish when I was a young Christian that perhaps older Christians who taught more stuff had talked more to us. The view tended to be, don't bother the teenagers. Now I say to churches, listen to your teens, listen to the young adults, listen to their questions, take the time to answer them, because often the questions are brilliant. They're often good answers, and they just need somebody to help them connect the dots.
And that's exactly that, Andy. I think the thing I say to people a lot is to don't be afraid to ask a question. And people are often shut down, but actually one of the reasons, and this segues perfectly into just the final few minutes of our chat, just about talking about Cedarwood Festival. You've obviously been involved for a few years with being involved in that in different ways. I know a couple of years ago you were involved with our friend Sharon Durix from the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics, doing a Q&A session, and that went down really well. It was awesome. And this coming year we're going to be doing a similar thing. There will be details announced in a few weeks about that and about what 2021 will look like. But we're really excited to have Andy, who's going to be coming back and being part of that.
Forward to it, David.
Being part of that Q&A, and I think it leads beautifully into saying that we're going to be involving anyone who wants to ask a question to fire away. To not saying that Andy and other people on the panel have all the answers, by far not. But it's so important to be able to grapple with those with people who've maybe thought about it a bit more than ourselves. So Andy, talk to us just briefly. Obviously, you were involved at Cedarwood a few years ago as well. Yep. But what can you say about Solas's maybe involvement in Cedarwood and the kind of positive? Why would you want to be part of an event like Cedarwood Festival?
Man, well, for a number of reasons, right? It's in a beautiful part of the world, and
you got to get more than that. You got to get more than that.
I know. I was getting there. Then I was going to big you up and get a chance to hang out with you and see what free gear you managed to sort of finagle out of trekking companies. But above all, very seriously, we love at Solas, I said this before, partnering with others, be it churches, be it Christian groups on universities or at workplaces, or in the case of what you're doing at Cedarwood. I think it's just a fantastic vision. I mean, firstly, the idea of bringing people together in that environment. There is something about natural beauty. God's created a beautiful world, and let's be honest, Northumbria and the Northeast is one really beautiful corner of a beautiful world, and there's something about being part of that. And I love the sort of vision you've got to bring people of all ages and backgrounds and to get lots of different churches involved. And so for us, it's a great opportunity to actually come and be a resource, come and do some teaching, come and pour into Christians from a whole variety of backgrounds. And so rather than, travel around to 30 different churches, we can come and speak to a whole group of different churches in one place and support what you folks are doing. And the other thing I like as well, by the way, I love seeing Christians who are entrepreneurs. I love seeing Christians who get the vision for let's do something new. And what you and the team are doing there at Cedarwood, I'm like, that is brilliant. Let's just try something innovative. Let's try something new. And I think it's perfect timing. Actually, it's amazing how God works. COVID was frustrating. Now we're coming out of that. I think a sort of small festival like you've got planned, people are going to be ready, man. People are being cooped up. They want something exciting to look forward to. And I think it's a great opportunity. So I hope lots of Christians will come from across the region, further afield. I hope some non-Christians will come. I hope people have got non-Christian friends or family members. They'll say, come on, come over and see what's going on. Go and ask Bannister or whoever else they've got a difficult question.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Andy. Thanks so much for sharing that. And we're looking forward to having you and some of the other team maybe join us at the festival. So just as we wrap, how can we be praying for you and the ministry as a network, Cedarwood Festival Network, and how can people find out more about the organization and your book as well, obviously?
Brilliant. We'll start with the latter, David. If they go to, we mentioned a couple of times, where they go to Solas CPC, that's Solas Centre for Public Christianity, solas-cpc.org. Or if you can't remember that, just put Andy Bannister into Facebook or wherever you'll find us. And our website's got loads of resources, videos and blogs and podcasts, all free, by the way. Anything you see on the Solas website, you can grab it, you reuse it, post it, share it, download it. And in terms of my book, there's a page there. You can't miss it because it's on the front page, and you can click through. It tells you all about the book, read more about it, and you can get a free first chapter in a print form or audio form. And you find out more. And then in terms of praying for you, it's very gracious for you to ask that for us. I think the main thing I'd pray, David, is this is the Easter weekend coming up when we're recording. This is live, isn't it? So it's Easter weekend coming up. And, we put quite a bit of content up on the Solas website around Easter. In particular, we did a webinar last night with a guy called Mike Lacona, who's a historian, probably one of the leading experts on the historical evidence of the resurrection. That went out last night, and we're pushing it, the recording over the weekend. Just would appreciate people praying that lands on the right screens, that people who perhaps don't have a Christian faith might come across it, or that Christians might watch it and go, gosh, I need to share that with my colleague, my husband, my neighbor. Because Mike does this just beautiful job, very gracious job of just showing you why, as a world-class historian, he is utterly convinced that Jesus rose from the dead, not because he believes it, but using the tools of history that he's trained in professionally, that leads him to that conclusion. So just really pray for the impact of the webinar we did with Mike.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And on behalf of the festival, we'll be sharing that. It's the question people are asking. Obviously, at the moment, it's an age-old question. It's something every year, and all through the year, people should be asking the question: did Jesus rise from the dead? There's no, I think, doubt historically that he died, but the question for many is, did he rise? And I think that's great. We're going to be sharing that on our channels, Andy, and sharing that for people to look at as well. But that does bring our conversation today to a close. Thank you to Andy, our guest, for joining us. To find out more about Andy and the work of Solas, check out the links below. We'll have them shared. And finally, to all our listeners, subscribers, and the network, thanks so much for joining us. We do look forward to next time. So stay safe and God bless.
Thanks again.
Give it a few secs and I'll just end that. A bit of a lag. There we go. That's ended. Great. Good stuff, my friend.